Caught me. Caught me by surprise there with the camera thing. Welcome to There's a Will, the new edition, first new edition for this year, 2020. And I hope our vision will be 2020. It's not my joke. Nicholas wrote that. I didn't want to say it.
I didn't write it. I can't claim responsibility for that one.
Nicholas, you wrote that joke. Stop writing jokes immediately.
Okay.
I'll write the jokes around here.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. Okay.
All right? Is that clear?
It is clear, yeah.
Yeah, you just hold my coat.
Yes, okay.
That's what your job is, okay?
Okay,
Are
fine.
we clear?
We
What
are
did I
clear.
say? Wrong!
Hold your coat.
Can you select some ties for Will next time?
Wrong.
Yeah,
Now, this tie was given to me by my great-great-grandfather who fought in the Battle of the Bulge.
Yep.
That wouldn't be my great-great-grandfather, no, great-grandfather. But actually, this was used by my Scottish ancestor in World War I on the Western Front. He strangled Nazis with it.
Right.
I think you'll find on the Western Front in World War I there weren't actually any Nazis at that stage. But I take no point on that.
He strangled
I don't want
somebody.
to spoil the story with my facts, obviously. That would be
Yes.
very impolite of me, since I'm a guest on your show, and you won't invite me back again.
What did I say? You're supposed to...
Yeah.
No Nazis in World War I?
No. Apparently you're one World War out. Your counting's wrong.
Was that the Franco-Prussian War?
Well, no,
The
World
Nazis?
War I was after the Franco-Prussian War.
Oh, you mean
In
going this way?
1872.
Going this way.
Yes.
Coming towards the...
Yes.
Do you verify this, Craig?
Whatever Nick says, I'm good with.
I'd like to welcome my guests after that brief comic interlude. They are Nicholas, no relation, Richardson, the
Inimitable.
Guy Pinsent, as seen on Poland Daily Travel.
Indeed.
And new to the studio, but not new to Poland, not new to Warsaw, and not new to us, especially Nicky, who met him on his first day, apparently, ever in Poland at the Marriott, where he was wearing short shorts.
An incredible.
Weird that you remember that.
Yeah.
Weird.
It is weird, kind of.
I don't know why he was taking a picture of me as well on that day, so I don't know where that, I want that picture back.
Very odd. Craig, Pasadena Smith.
Yeah.
It's good to see you in the studio.
Thanks, good to have you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
You
Yeah.
a hearty, a Laurel and hearty handshake.
A warm southern
Need a
welcome.
Laurel.
Just in case you don't invite me back, let's do it one more time.
No,
Yeah,
you're
good,
going to be
good,
back.
Good,
You're gonna
good,
be- If
good.
you're available. I know you're very busy. You're one of the world's busiest guys. Yeah.
I'm always available for you.
And well, thank you. That's very nice. And the inimitable Mr. Pinsent, also extremely busy. You and I laying about
Yeah, exactly. Doing nothing.
Right, do
Yeah.
nothing. Yeah.
Terrible.
down by the river
Yep.
in the van,
In the van?
dispensing, you know,
Pearls of
self-help
wisdom, yeah.
advice from the back of it. We sell self-help advice from the back of our van down by the
We do,
river,
yes.
don't we?
Yeah.
Actually, that's that old routine from Saturday Night Live. Let's talk about a few of the things that are going on in the news, and that are perennials as well. Some of them, because they involve perennial subjects. For example, the Brexit passing is finally passed. What does that mean? I turn to you,
What does
Mr.
that
Pinsent.
mean? Well, after 3.5 years since there was a over 1.3 million majority of Brits voting to leave, largest number of people who voted forever. There's 3 years plus of prevarication. Finally, there was a general election in which Boris Johnson's main slogan was, "Get Brexit done." The British people liked that, and Boris Johnson won an enormous majority of +80 margin in the House of Commons. So now there's no more prevarication and blocking in the House of Parliament. That general election was 12th of December, a few weeks ago. And this literally yesterday, having pushed it through all the stages of Parliament, the withdrawal bill, now it is the Withdrawal Act, received royal assent. Her Majesty the Queen signed it into law, which means in
Were
less...
Harry and Meghan involved?
So in less than a week,
No,
in
they've
less than
opted
a
out.
week,
They've
Britain
opted out,
has legally Britain leaves.
Legally,
In-
Britain leaves. Fine.
In reality, it won't feel like any change for many months, if not years, because there now has to be this transition period, which expires at the end of this year. And in that time, there will be negotiated a new trading relationship between Britain as a third country and the EU 27. And if that is not agreed, then it just defaults back to World Trade Organization trading terms, which is fine for Britain because they're a massive trading net importer of more goods from the EU 27 than they buy from Britain. So Britain would actually make an enormous amount of money if there was no special deal. Just the very low tariffs of the World Trade Organization would actually very much benefit Britain. So we're going to see what happens. The real question is, how does Britain now use its independence to make its own laws to suit Britain's? How does it use that freedom in law and in economic policy to move forwards? And that will only reveal itself over decades.
What about, let's link it. We got a story about Mr. Daniel Tusk, right? We got a story about...
Donald.
Sorry, Donald Tusk.
Donald.
Yeah. And, of course, how could I miss that name? Donald
Yes,
Tusk.
this is today's Telegraph had a funny article about Donald Tusk. Of course, he was
talking about being in England and
he's been in
studying
England.
this.
He's obviously got a lot more time on his hands now since there's been a sort of change of the guard at the Commission in Brussels, and he's on record here complaining about the wonderful city of Bath in the west of England.
He's complaining about Bath, the city that everyone says is the epitome of 18th century architecture.
He's down there saying that the architecture is just a circle of boring, identical facades. And then he goes, and if I put on his little lisp, it's cold, it winds mercilessly, it rains.
It winds?
It rains almost all the time, the nights are black, the days are dark grey, and I'm suffering from fever and cough. I might just as well go and hang myself. Donald
He
Tusk.
says I might just hang myself?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, goodness me. He's
Sounds like there's a number of
Can we
problems
send
here
him
to
some
deal
rope?
with. Yeah.
Can we send him some rope? No, but seriously.
How can you possibly,
Bath is
coming
one of
from Poland in particular, no, seriously, criticise the architecture of Bath? One of the great townscapes
Coming from
of
Poland in the
Western
sense that much of Poland's
civilization.
architecture was destroyed.
Yes, I know.
In several wars.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is it's just a peculiar thing to say. And
Bath
to
is
think
the epitome
exactly.
of 18th century
It
architecture.
was good. If it was good enough for Jane Austen, it's good enough for the rest
Hey,
of us.
if it was good enough for the Romans,
Exactly.
because the Romans famously selected that spot to put, hence the name Bath.
Exactly.
The Roman Bath.
Yeah.
Which you can still see under the city centre.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
I believe it's under there's a shopping centre or something.
No, it's
No,
not
no.
100%, but you can see it.
Beautifully preserved.
Yes.
It's beautifully
Roman
preserved.
Bath.
So you're
Marvelous
thinking about the gift shop. There's
Yeah,
a
I
gift
went to
shop.
the gift
Yeah,
shop.
you went to the gift shop.
Yeah, I went to the gift
Got
shop.
the magnet.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They wouldn't let me bath, which was a bit disappointing. Because that was the reason I went there. I thought I was going to be like a Roman, you know?
Yeah.
I brought one of those things I could throw up in, you know?
Yeah, good. No, you
After
were-
going to
Did
McDonald's.
you bring a toga?
What?
Did you have a toga?
I had a few togas.
You can go to
I liked
Budapest with that
different-
stuff, though.
I have one sequin toga. You should see it. It's amazing.
Nice.
What?
You could go to Budapest for the togas and bath
Yeah?
houses. Yeah.
They let you. Oh, in Budapest, in
Yeah,
the middle
yeah,
of the
there's
river.
loads of 'em. Yeah.
That's the great.
Yeah,
thing,
this is a good
isn't
one.
it? Yeah, I must do that. That'd be fun. But anyway, so Mr. Tusk doesn't like Bath, which is the city that everyone in the world thinks is amazing.
And it's strange.
Yes.
All architects love Bath,
And what was he doing there?
except for maybe.
On his own language course,
language
apparently, which
course.
was evident from that quote.
Yeah,
This is-
He was on a language course.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. I mean, people can make mistakes in language, but he's. I mean, you shouldn't make a
Your
mistake
mistake in
about the
architecture.
beauty of Bath.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
a language of mistakes. I mean, if I were speaking Polish, I'm sure I'd make plenty of mistakes.
Of course.
But,
I think we're all sure of that.
yeah. Thank you, Nicholas. Yeah.
As would I.
Yeah.
Just so you don't feel alone.
I feel terrible now.
So the fallout from the election and
I'm
the
caught
change
again.
of guard has been absolutely astounding. I mean, what a different place Britain is today compared to just 6 months ago,
Yeah.
when Brussels was on the front foot, doing everything they could to reverse the result, making life as difficult as possible.
Yeah.
Tables have turned now. Boris Johnson, who led the Leave campaign,
Yeah.
won that with Dominic Cummings running his campaign. The moment he became Prime Minister, puts Dominic Cummings into the centre of number 10 as his chief advisor, who's really shaking things up. And guess
I'm not
what?
surprised that
And
Mr.
guess-
Tusk is. Sorry if I
Yeah.
may. Mr. Tusk is anti Brexit if he doesn't even, and anti-Britain if he doesn't even like Bath? See,
Yes.
obviously he doesn't like anything traditional.
I mean, we're probably
No.
giving too much airtime to Donald Tusk. But
He's anti-tradition.
He did mention during the negotiations last year that, you know, the Brexiteers who'd made this all happen, he said what was frankly a disgraceful thing to say in any diplomatic scene. He said that there's a special place in hell for the Brexiteers. I mean,
this is totally totalitarian.
Yeah.
People are allowed to have a difference of opinion.
Well, I think to be fair to him for a second, in the interest of objectivity, what he said was there's a special place in hell reserved for Brexiteers who didn't have a plan. I think that's what he actually said. I mean, to be fair to him, it's still a strange thing for a supposedly impartial political leader of an organisation of which we were part to say.
Right.
But I mean, he did actually.
when have they ever been impartial?
Well, they're not impartial. They have a different. But I mean, I think this is part of the problem when you're dealing with the European Union, is that most of us, particularly those of us from an Anglo-Saxon legal background, would try and argue or debate things on a rational basis. And of course, the European Union is about a political plan which does not allow of any dissension from the plan. Ever closer union, as set out in the Treaty of Rome. So it doesn't, like the European currency is a good example. That's not normally. This is not normally how you would create a common currency. You sort of go from having a political union which allows you to have a tax union, which allows you to have a currency union, as per the United States. The European Union set up the common currency, the euro, as a political project. So they did it. The currency came first, and which is why you have all this tension with Greece, with Ireland, for example. Two particular examples, Italy to a lesser extent. And it doesn't matter how much economists or other people will try and discuss this in a rational basis. There is no rational argument because the European Union is a wholly political project, and those in charge of it at any given time are motivated wholly by the pursuit of this political project, and therefore are not open and cannot be open in their own definition to rational argument, which we saw actually.
Which is not totally on board.
Yes, and which is why we saw that. Which is why the whole withdrawal negotiations got off on the wrong foot, because the British government, the then British government, sort of accepted this, being told by the European Union, oh, we're going to do it in two phases. First we agree this, then we agree that. When actual Article 50 said something completely different. So the European Union is very good at telling the rest of the world, particularly Poland, the rule of law, you have to do X, Y, Z. But when it suits, itself is quite happy to disobey its own laws in pursuit of this overarching political project. The end, in the European Union eyes, the end justifies the means, which of course is the road to totalitarian unhappiness.
Of course.
Okay,
throughout history.
Yeah.
And then, related to that, we just last week had the death of a fantastic conservative thinker, polymath Sir Roger Scruton,
Right.
who also there was a wonderful article actually written about him by the Polish ambassador to London,
Yes.
essentially praising his...
Who's going to be a guest on this show?
Yeah, fantastic.
I met him over Christmas.
And because he was at the forefront helping Poland and dissidents in the fight against communism.
Indeed.
And bringing real freedom to Poland.
True anti-totalitarian personage.
Yeah.
And I say personage because he's
But he was always
estimable figure.
He was always, describes himself like me as a huge Europhile, but against the EU. And there's a wonderful...
Define that, would you?
A Europhile...
As opposed to an EU proponent.
Well, Europhile being pro-Europe.
A lover of Europe. And
the European peoples, its cultures and history.
Yeah.
Some difficult history. But the EU being a temporary political project which is not serving the interests of the people, manifestly.
Poll exit? Poll exit? Because it's come up.
Polls apart, potentially. There are recent opinion polls now suggesting that more Poles are in favour of leaving the EU
than
staying.
Why do you think that is?
I think that is probably because, well, there's obviously a lot of tension at the moment. Poland has a strong government in the Law and Justice Party. They've just won a second term in office. And
that nationalist government, they call it. As if government shouldn't have their nation's interests first. It's hilarious.
Indeed.
No, we should have Germany's interests first. Wait a second. I don't know if you're a history buff or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But just going back to Roger
Scruton,
Scruton,
so well in the past.
Roger Scruton articulates beautifully why the European Union doesn't work. Certainly didn't work for Britons, and why it doesn't generally work. And it's essentially the core about it is the legal structure. in that Britain has inherited from Roman law the common law, and no one really understands how it works. It's like a bit of... Dan Hannan describes it in his wonderful book, Why Vote Leave. It's like coral that grows and evolves. And Roger Scruton also explains it's basically on common sense. Two parties can have a dispute. They can take that dispute in a British court before an English judge, and then the common sense is applied. Whereas Napoleon turned it on its head.
Everything's a code.
And it's top-down code written down in a book, volumes of civil code.
Instead of coming from practical cases,
Exactly.
it comes from an intellectual viewpoint,
Exactly.
from the top
Yeah.
down. Yeah.
And I think one of the things you'll see, though, in Poland, as with the, people were asking me, are you pro, Brexit or against Brexit? And I would say, for the last year, I was just pro make a decision.
Sure.
Because all of our, let's say, investor clients, they just weren't doing anything. And I think what you'll see for real hands-on in business in Poland and Central Eastern Europe, and probably Western Europe too, is people will be making the decisions now. It's been almost 3 years of very, people putting things off.
Sure.
And then probably
Nature
you're running
and business abhors a vacuum.
Yeah, and now that at least a decision's made, whatever it would have been, at least a decision's made, now things will move forward, and they are moving forward. I think people are, whether they liked it or not, it's like, okay, now we know what to do with our business plan and how we're going to deal with Central Europe or even Europeans and where the investment's going to go. So at least things are going to move forward, which it's been probably you ran into the same thing doing business here. It's just, 80% of the people are like, well, we got to see what's happening with Brexit. I'm like, why? Okay, well now they know. Now it's pretty clear. Sure. And I think it's a good thing for Central Eastern Europe. I think it's a good thing for the UK. I mean, just that a decision's been done.
Well, now you finally have in Britain one of the strongest governments we've had since the heyday of Tony Blair in the late 90s. We've got a prime minister now who's at the... You can't be stronger than where he is right now. He's just won a huge majority.
Yeah, he has the mandate to do what he wants.
And he's got a cabinet reshuffle threatened in a few weeks' time. It's already been it's already been labelled as it's going to be the Valentine's massacre.
The government in this country, the PIS government in this country, expanded their majority as well.
Sure.
Not in the Senate, but in the House.
But the point is now is that you've now, for the first time since 2010 actually, in Britain, got a strong government, so they can sit down and negotiate their position, and for the first time in the dealings between Britain and the EU Commission and the so-called EU 27, there can be a real negotiation now, because the so-called no deal is back on the table.
What do you say, panel, to people from the more left of center who completely disavow any type of disunion by any of the countries in the EU on the face of it, that it's just a ridiculous decision to leave the EU? How do you respond to them?
I think that we have to understand people's positions, and this is actually one of the problems I find with the left. They sit in their echo chamber of self-righteousness, and they call themselves liberal, and yet there's nothing more illiberal than shouting down, blocking, offending anybody that doesn't share a room, share the same view.
Attacking people in restaurants as they were doing in the United States.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Vote them out, folks.
There's a wonderful parody. There's a wonderful parody account. What's her name? There's a sort of blonde social justice warrior parody created on Twitter. And there was a quote soon after the election, it was around Christmas, where she, on this parody account, said, right, we in the Labour Party, in the progressive liberal left, we have to make sure this time that we get the right leader and persuade those knuckleheads living in the north to vote for us because they got it wrong again last time. I think, when are they going to understand that telling people you were wrong and you're stupid and you're racist and you don't buy into this gender identity politics, social justice warrior thing, as long as you keep pushing that agenda, Labour are never getting anywhere near number 10.
I mean, this is the problem with the left. The Labour Party, in English terms, has completely abandoned its traditional voters. And you may say that people may not be as sophisticated as their critics. They may not have time to study the politics or philosophy. But nobody, whoever they are, however stupid these people may think they are, deserves to be talked down to. And you talk down to your electorate at your peril. And even if the Remain side had secured a second referendum in the UK, I think Leave would have won, because a lot of people who might otherwise have been persuaded to change their vote to Remain were not prepared to suffer the indignity of being talked down to people. Being talked
There's
down
a lot
to
of talking down. Yeah.
And
The actual party is called Labour, not Social Justice Warrior
But
Party.
this is the point, and this
Or
social
Diversity
justice
Party.
warriorship
That's not the name of it.
Yes.
is completely it's completely divorced from the daily life of these people they purport to be representing, and people can see the hypocrisy and the stupidity. People want simple things.
But the general election really did
Yeah.
sock it to Westminster. There was a wonderful hosing out of the Orgian stables. I get just one example, another example of many of MPs that lost their seats.
Yeah.
The leader of the Liberal Democratic Party, a lady called Jo Swinson,
Yeah.
who was standing for a seat in Scotland, she very arrogantly was putting posters up around the country saying, "Jo Swinson, your next Prime Minister." She was taken to pieces by Andrew Neil, saying, "At what point in your life did you start indulging in fantasy politics?"
That reminds me of in the United States.
And she lost her seat by about 140 votes.
It's pretty
It was
amazing.
poetic
She
justice.
just lost.
In the 2015 general election,
The leader of
The
the
leader-
Liberal, of the Social, what are they called?
Liberal
Democrats.
Which was an oxymoron, by the way.
Yeah.
They,
The Liberal Democrats, because I remember it was Social Democrats and the Liberal Party, they combined, of course.
Yeah.
We know the
but that's
story
quite
with
clever. They
Jenkins
lost
and
two. They
Shirley
lost.
Williams,
They
et
lost
cetera.
their leader,
David
Nick
Owen.
Clegg, in the 2015 election, and two
Yeah.
elections later, they lost the next leader. I mean, they're very careless when it comes to leaders, the Liberal Democrats, to lose them. So with such,
There was always a very strong element of the Scottish in the Liberal Party, but that's been subsumed by the Scottish Nationalist Party now.
Well, the
That
Scottish
element
Nationalist
that
Party,
was
I mean,
in the Liberal
yeah,
Party,
they-
because their leaders were coming.
Yeah.
A lot of their leadership was coming from Scotland. For a
Yeah.
long
It
time.
was.
Yeah.
As was the Labour parties. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all right for the Scots nationalists to say, well, we didn't vote to leave the European Union. It's not fair. For many years, Labour governments only existed in the United Kingdom as a whole because of the massive vote they received in Scotland. And you think how many cabinet ministers used to be Scots. And most English people did not go around saying, "Oh, this government is not in my name. I didn't vote for to be told what to do by the Scots." So, what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander.
Yes.
Well, there's just two. In the name of diversity, it's what it really is becoming chaos.
Exactly.
It's becoming chaos. It's not diversity, it's disintegration.
Yes.
It's a much better word. Disintegration. Focus on, this, everyone is different, like the doctors tell you, we'll divide, This is a sales technique.
If we can quote,
You know-
if we can quote the famous fund manager Peter Lynch and apply it to a different context.
Go ahead.
It's not diversification, it's diversification.
Diversification. I
It's
haven't heard
diversity.
that.
He said that about. He's talking about building a portfolio.
I like
but-
disintegration as well,
yeah,
but I buy that.
we want
yeah.
diversity. We've got diversity.
Well, no, the whole point
and
of
this balkanization of life.
democracy or republics have to, let's talk about republics, because I think it's a more useful term. But because we don't have pure democracies unless we have plebiscites, as in the Brexit vote. But when you have a republic, it is built on broad strokes. It has to be. You cannot have the ends, or to use the Warren metaphor, the tail of the dog wagging the rest. And this is what is happening with too much diversity or diversification. What we really need is more fairness.
Yes.
Fairness, equal rights under the law, and fairness is really what we need.
Well, back to straight talking and evidence-based argument.
Yeah.
And driving policy.
Yes.
I have a hope, so hope springs eternal, that we might have reached sort of peak madness and peak wokeness on the 13th of December last year, when obviously there's a lot of denial still amongst many people in the Labour Party, and in spite of the madness of Magic Grandpa, the nickname for Jeremy Corbyn, and his losers' policies, over 10 million...
Is that Private Eye?
Yeah, Magic Grandpa. Over 10 million people still voted for Labour in the last election. So, there's still a hard core of madness there.
Yeah.
But we've seen very recently now a few examples where perhaps the tide is turning. So one little example, last week, the BBC have this regular programme called Question Time, and they have a panel, they have a couple of politicians, one or two artists, sometimes a comedian, and an audience who just pose questions to the panel on TV. And last week it was filmed in Liverpool, still a Labour stronghold, and on the panel was this actor Lawrence Fox, who didn't toe the typical lovey line, and he just spoke straight common sense. And
son of James Fox or Edward
know.
Fox?
He is, I think, the nephew of one of them.
I think he's son of one and nephew of the other.
Yeah.
Because James and
Yeah.
Edward Fox. But I mean, it's worth saying because comes from an acting family.
The interesting point, out of lots of interesting points, they were talking about Meghan and Harry and them stepping back from the royal family. And he had a very sympathetic answer and saying, it's very difficult, you've got a young child, it's hard, it's tough, and I empathise. And as a young family, you want to make your own life and so on. But they should probably give back their titles and Frogmore Cottage and so on. Then there was a young academic from some place you've never heard of, probably doing social justice warrior studies. Probably. Very likely, actually, today.
Being a St. Andrews man, I agree.
And she was saying, no, the whole thing is Meghan's had enough of Britain because the country's horribly racist, she's black, and it's all a horrible racist hellhole in Britain. And Lawrence Fox very calmly said, I disagree. I think Britain's one of the most welcoming places in the world, and it's not about racism at all. And then she tried to say, this academic, well, you're white. You suffer from white privilege. You have no right to even comment on this matter.
And he said...
And no, here's the point. There was a huge groan in the audience. Everyone in Liverpool was like, oh my God, are you seriously pulling that card? And then he hit back and said, hey, what you just said was racist.
Yeah, it is racist.
I was born
to
white.
Tell people
that is not my fault.
You can't change it.
I was born how I was.
Yeah.
That is an immutable thing about me. How dare you?
My other
come
thing
out
is
that you racist.
My other thing
there's
is
there's some common sense is starting to come through now.
But if being white is so awful, then why were the founding fathers? Why didn't they come from India or China or Africa or Middle East?
Yes, exactly.
There must be a reason. Was it just an accident of fate? I don't think so. But it's a matter of philosophy and adherence to philosophy.
Is that racism is very serious, and we shouldn't belittle it by using it as a blanket to shut up people with whom we disagree, and it should be used only where we genuinely encounter it, so we can actually deal with it. And to just bandy it around, I don't like what you're saying, so you're racist, so you have to shut up. He said is actually doing nobody a service at all.
So the PC Brigade has infiltrated the police in the last couple of decades so much that the police are not doing their jobs if it involves investigating certain ethnic groups, because they don't want to have the racist card pulled against them. And so you've had these awful cases of grooming gangs, ghastly paedophilia cases and sex slavery and all the rest of it being perpetrated by Asians living in Britain. And the police have ignored it when the evidence has been overwhelming.
Also, the other point
and
is,
this is being uncovered now.
But the other point is the use of the term Asian is itself a euphemism, because it's not Asians, it's not people from China or Indonesia or Malaysia or the Philippines or Cambodia or Laos or any of these other countries. It is a particular section of people from one country, Pakistan. But nobody says Pakistan. But Asian has now become this euphemism, because people will not call a spade, and this is why you don't get things done. And
I remember being in Pakistan.
But this is a tragic failing of these young girls who deserve better.
Nick, I was in Pakistan in November of 2001 in the tribal areas in Dara, where they do nothing but make weapons. And I had an interview with the head man. I was with a photographer from the New York Times. I had a fixer from Afghanistan. And, this is a lawless area. And, you've read about it and you know about it. But I think you may have even read that article.
Read it in our magazine back
your
then.
magazine published it at the time,
You had that big butcher on the front,
There was a guy, there was I had this crazy picture which is encapsulated of a butcher in Peshawar, with this crazed look with a knife, he's covered in blood. And it was seemed metaphorical for the madness of the time. But that the head man of Dara, we sat, drank tea, and he says, William, one of the things, William, I do wish the British were still here.
Yes.
And I'm American.
Yeah.
So, but so it wasn't. He was not catering, pandering, and why would he? He's the head man, of the main town of this whole area. It's lawless, one of the most lawless areas on the planet, and that was his comment. So I defer to the head man of Dara, and if you don't like it, lump it, because that's what he said, and I was there. I recommend that people try it sometime. Go there, find out for yourself, instead of sitting back and taking these easy, soft, thoughtless opinions about what's really going on in the world, because you don't get it, you don't know. Most people don't know what's really at the heart of these things. It's not so easy. And racism is a thing that is bandied about. Like goes with like most of the time. Pigeons don't mate with crows. And I'm paraphrasing something that Muhammad Ali said on, I believe it was Michael Parkinson's show. And you can still find it. It's from the 1970s. It's on YouTube. Look up Muhammad Ali on Michael Parkinson, and that might just change some of your easy viewpoints. Look, we're all different, but we have to get along together. That's the point. And we should, because there are things to appreciate in every culture. But not all cultures are equal, any more than all people are equal. It does not happen in nature. Some squirrels are better squirrels than other squirrels because they're smarter, they're more athletic, they can climb better, they're better at storing nuts, whatever it is. If you keep it at its, to use a squirrely metaphor.
It's always good to be better at storing nuts, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Or separating the nuts from the, what's useful in life. So, and if you look at, the white privilege. Well, this is one of the reasons I think in politics people have been jumping on Poland, because it's a country, everybody's white. They can't help it any more than everybody in Rwanda can help being black. It's not okay to be in Rwanda and be black. But it's bad to be white in Poland. It's ridiculous to say that. And that is very left-wing attitude. It is childish and vapid. And it is leading to trouble everywhere.
It is leading to trouble.
Yeah. And Poland does accept refugees, but they accept people more like them. The Ukrainians, for example, 2 million of them. And why do they accept them? Well, they're next door. Ukrainians need help. And traditionally, there's a lot of crossover in those two communities. But have they always been friends? No, any more than tribes have always been friends in Africa, in certain areas, like Rwanda. Okay? So we're all human beings here. And the point is that there is no easy answer other than understanding and fairness in dealing with each other. That's what we have to do. And business is a good way of doing this.
Sure. I think that business leaders are happy with the way things are going now, I would even say. But even in Poland, the Polish
What's going on in Poland?
Yeah, the Polish government is pretty, they're pretty pro-investor. They're looking for investors. They're looking for people to open businesses here. I just met with the president of PAIA, which is the old PAIS, and it's more different ones than maybe before, but they're more, they're looking for manufacturing, they're looking for IT, they're looking to help build the business. If you watch the news says they're not, but they're spending a lot of time on looking for.
Poland's an economic powerhouse. The growth is ticking along at 3.5–4%, which is 4 times faster than the average growth rate in the rest of the EU. As I mentioned before, it's been growing constantly for about 28 years. The only country to keep growing, even in 2009, during the depths of the worst crisis. The skyline in Warsaw tells you all you need to know. Just yesterday in the news, huge milestone in business for Poland. LOT Polish Airlines bought a German airline. And one of the Polish ministers, one of the Polish ministers was saying, normally it's the other way around. We've got German and American companies all buying up Polish companies. This was actually a huge step. And LOT, my friend, run lot now for 4 years, and gone from a fleet of 40-odd planes to 80 planes. He's tripled the routes. He made it profitable in its first year when it had been loss-making for its entire 80-year history, bar 1 year.
You mean lot?
Yeah.
Generally.
Lot, yeah.
And then a 300 million euro deal yesterday,
Yeah.
announced, pending antitrust clearances, should close in April this year.
And there is
Huge
a lot
step
of Polish,
forward.
and there is a lot of Polish companies setting up in Germany and have set up there and doing business there and
Sure.
buying. They may not make the news, but buying other German companies and doing, or just opening there and doing a lot of business there. And you know, they seem to be quite happy with it and doing more investment. I mean, not only in Germany, but around the around the world. So that's and I would say quite good news, good for expansion, and you know, there's a lot of good ideas, a lot of good entrepreneurs here that have just grown their businesses out of Poland now.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that one of the best ways of creating good relations between different types of people and different countries and different religions, go across the board, is some kind of basis of exchange, which is, you know, business. I mean, that's what created society in the first place.
Sure.
Let's exchange goods, and let's find a way to do that fairly. And instead of taking over countries, for example, as Poland saw. People used to ask me, why did you come to Poland? I said, obviously, it's the best real estate in Europe. It's worth looking at, isn't it? You know, a lot of Polish people used to ask me, I said, it's great real estate. Have you checked your own history? You know, and I think it's true. It's a great location. It's a crossroads. So it's no accident that people have been fighting over this area for so long, and that it also was one of the great kingdoms when it was for 300 years.
Yeah.
With, and partly
Norman
with
Davis's History of Poland, very aptly named God's Playground.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Well, let's leave it on that. I think it's been a fascinating discussion. I want to thank you for coming in. I hope you come back, Craig. It's been really good having you in.
Well, as long as we survive the coronavirus, which is coming, we'll be back, right?
I don't even know what that is.
I hope you're still laughing
Nothing
about
to
it
do with
next time.
drinking.
Is it
Nothing
like
to do
a
with drinking.
sunspot or something?
No, it's killed 42 people and counting so far, and China are trying to quarantine 3 cities with populations over 10 million each, which has never been done in the history of humankind. So
Do they really think it's like a plague?
Yeah, it's like
Potentially.
they're saying it's like similar or worse than the
SARS.
Spanish flu.
Yeah, the
The
SARS
Spanish
virus.
flu,
yeah,
which
yeah.
after World War I killed more people than the war.
Yeah,
It killed over
exactly.
60 million people.
Well, there was
Kills
9
many more people than the war.
Yeah.
And that killed a lot of people died in that war.
30 million.
So that was a good Lord. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a point worth remembering. Well, we'll have to follow that.
I saw a bit.
Maybe
they're
this
building.
is our last show.
Yeah. Well, let's hope not.
No, I'll come back.
But
Listen, I know a doctor in Brooklyn. Let me tell you, we'll fly over there. We'll get some good stuff. We'll be fine.
But yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you for the interview. Thank you for the
Thank you, Craig.
letting me
Coming.
on. Yeah.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming. And
Thank you, Willett.
thank you, cousin Nikki, no relation, and the
Thank God for
inimitable
that.
Guy Pinsent, and Craig Pasadena Smith. And I thank you for your cogent views, and I hope that on the next program we will continue with such vivid discussion. Okay. All right.
Great.
Thanks for watching. That's There's a Will, and we'll see you next time.